Evan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Stefan. Thanks for having me. It's quite a privilege and an honor.
Hey man, the pleasure is mine. The creator of my Lightning wallet. It's always a pleasure to talk to my Lightning wallet, Mr. Zeus himself. Um, yeah, man. Look, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into Lightning development, and particularly how you got into starting Zeus, which is one of my go-to Lightning wallets.
Awesome. Yeah. So probably got into Bitcoin space around 2014. So like my last year of college, I was studying CS, and from there, just following Bitcoin pretty intently. And after using it, after getting acquainted with the mempool, our restrictions on block space, just how the whole payment flows work. It became pretty obvious that doing on-chain transactions wasn't gonna scale to the whole world, and we'd need better solutions. So when I finally heard about Lightning, a lot of things clicked. It made a lot of sense. A lot of the properties it brought to Bitcoin were super exciting to me. So it took a little while to get everything spun up, but as soon as I could pragmatically do it, I spun up my own Lightning node and got my hands dirty with that. So started with my own little setup with LND on my computer, and then got a Raspberry Pi that I had sitting in my drawer and put it all on there. And I actually did the Raspberry Pi Bolt guide that Staticus put
Yeah.
together, and that was my first little self sustained little node. And yeah, from there I went on to like Raspberry Pi Blitz to get those community updates. But I really had a great time, like just seeing how fast the transactions were going through and getting settled. I mean, it took a little time of playing around, figuring out how channels work and whatnot. But ultimately, I realized, it's great to be able to do these Lightning transactions from my desk. But ultimately, where this thing is really going to shine is, out on the go, uh, in person, and in retail, and being able to do those instant payments. So I had started building up this node, and I had this basic functionality I wanted to bring. And basically, I had never done a mobile app before, so this is my first like real one I've shipped. I've worked on some small ones, but yeah, at work I was working in cybersecurity, and I did a lot of front end stuff the couple of years before that, and I got really well acquainted with React, and I had heard about React Native, this mobile framework equivalent that lets you spit out binaries for Android and iOS, and I figured this would be the perfect project to sink my teeth into it with. So started with basic functionality, just being able to send, receive on chain and on the LN. And as I built up my little node, I wanted to be able to manage it on the bus as I was going into work to my cyber job. So I wanted functionality to look at my channels, open new ones, see how, if I was routing any, if at all. Like back in the day, it was nothing, especially just on my little Pi with Tor.
Yeah.
But
And just to be
still,
clear, we're talking, this is like 2018, 2019, or where are we at this point?
yeah, so it has to be like 2019. So the app came out, or well, it got published February or March of 2019. So we're 3 years deep into this right now. So yeah, so like winter of 2018 is like when I was like really starting to mess around with stuff. And yeah, I was just going on the bus to work every day, and sometimes listening to SLP, sometimes TFTC, and then going home in the evenings and hacking on this app, really just to scratch my own itch. So to learn this new framework that I'd heard so much about, but B, also to just suit my own needs. And now we've got a significant amount of the Lightning network, at least in public capacity terms, using the app, and it's quite incredible.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, so I mean, my experience was, you know, I I think I stumbled across it online, obviously, because we were all kind of in this little Bitcoin Twitter echo chamber, and then I found it, and then I was like, I think I started using it around 2019 and maybe mid or a bit late 2019 because I remember using it actually when I was going to the Lightning conference, the first Lightning conference in 2019. And so I remember using it, and at that point, I had a MyNode set up, and I had Zeus connected to my own MyNode back home. And to me, it was just crazy because back then I was halfway across the world in Germany, uh, spending and receiving sats, and it was all running off my node halfway in the other side of the world over in my living room in Sydney, and it was just like that was just mind blowing to me. You know, that was so crazy to me. And Lightning Conference 2019 was really it really felt like living in the future because you could just go to merchants, right? And you were buying ice cream or buying a beer or things like this,
Yeah.
and it just really felt magical. And like that was, and now like we take that for granted at Bitcoin conferences now that you can just pay and
Oh
receive in
man, that's
Lightning.
great. Yeah, so I actually remember Lightning conference, or at least I remember watching you post the videos, and I'm like, wow, Stephan Livera is using my wallet, and it was like the cocktail machine, right? Like when you pick your
Yes.
mixed drink, and it dispenses it for you for like $1, like crazy rates. Um, yeah, that was really awesome to see. Just popping by in my feed, so that was quite an amazing moment. But yeah, there's that magic when you actually do that transaction in the real world and get tangible goods or services for it, and it just confirms like before your eyes. A lot of those moments in Miami for the conference, when was it, last month?
Yeah,
um,
for sure. For sure. So, I
yeah,
mean,
it's really cool to see a lot of
focusing.
vendors starting to accept it. It's becoming a real tangible thing now. It's great.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad to see that, right? Because I think a few years ago, I would have been more focused on hodling, right? But nowadays, I do see a value more to building this so-called circular economy. I think it's more of an ideological focus, but I believe it makes the whole system more robust, right? Because if there are more easy ways that you can earn and spend, and you know, I see more value to that idea. So, I'm definitely hopeful to see more of that. Even if I still believe hodling is most important, I still want to see some
Well,
circular
Stefan,
economy.
you got to hodl your money first to be able to spend it, right? That's step one, right? Uh, but yeah, for me, it's really important to get some spending going to get these circular economies going, because well, first and foremost, I think Bitcoin is on a quite solid trajectory. Don't get me wrong; there's still lots of ways for it to fail, go butt up, to get captured, and I have a bit of a fear of uh, the predominant way people use in the future is through these these neo banks of sorts or on these custodial rails, and when those institutions are the predominant way Bitcoin gets used, we lose a lot of its benefits, right? We lose its censorship resistance, right? We lose the supply cap in some ways, right? That people can do these paper like claims that we see today in like gold markets or whatever. Um, and and yeah, I mean, part of building Zeus is trying to give people those tools to be able to do Bitcoin in this self sovereign way. So you know, I have no doubt that Bitcoin and Lightning even will continue to become even more pervasive in our society and on our even existing payment platforms, especially with stuff like Taro just down the road. uh, we could end up seeing the stuff in, anywhere, everyone from Venmo to traditional banks. And I think that's going to be the way a lot of people get onto Bitcoin, for better or worse. But I want to make sure that Zeus is always there available for people for when they're ready to take things, or if they're ready to take things into their own hands and take that personal responsibility and, take advantage of all the properties that it gives you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's different ways to use Zeus, right? Like you can do the home node. In some cases, like for me, I have a VPS where I use my BTC Pay, and that's how I connect my Zeus to my LND on that. Um, so that's another way people can use Zeus. And I think Zeus is known for being the more full node wallet aspect. So that, are you planning to keep that aspect of it, or are you actually thinking about light clients and light wallets as well, or are you thinking no, this needs to be the hardcore full node wallet?
So there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff going on in the space to make it more feasible for people to have good experience, good user experience when with light clients and whatnot. Ultimately, what I've decided as far as Zeus is that Zeus is going to remain a remote only app. I definitely am looking into some ways to provide like client experiences to people, but I think that would be best suited for a second app. We want to make sure that Zeus users can continue using it the same way they always have, and that binary stays as light and compact as possible. It's already a pretty big app considering all the React Native stuff. We don't want to end up throwing 100 megabyte binary on top of that in there for users. But at the same time, I believe there's a room for us to have perhaps a second app, have the node running on there, and users having a quite comparable experience that they would have using the standalone app versus using Zeus. And perhaps we can even have some sort of bridge where we encourage people to look into all the different options available to them, educate them on some of the perks that they would get having their node somewhere else other than their phone, and and encourage people to upgrade if that works for them.
Yeah, gotcha. And I'm curious as well, how much of it is like an educational journey as well? Like, let's say somebody who is a new Lightning user, they sort of install the app. Like, would you look at maybe, I mean, I guess there's different ways you could go. Like, as an example, let's say something like a voltage.cloud or something like a green light, and could it sort of spin up, you know, or could there be kind of ways that you could connect in the background to sort of set that up? Or maybe, like you're saying, that would be for another app, but it kind of, like you're saying, it could kind of guide you.
So, um, with as far as the cloud services go, they're very interesting, and I'm grateful that people are experimenting with them, offering up great solutions for people to get these very well connected nodes that are really ideal for enterprise and retail and all this stuff. That's great. But I don't think that's necessarily the primary focus of Zeus. I really want people to take as much of that control into their own hands. So I think a secondary app would have a focus with the node being on device, but have that extra lift, that help being perhaps from some sort of LSP services. I'm really
Gotcha.
intrigued by what can be done with PTLCs and the enhancements there that can allow users to accept payments when they may not be online. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have ahead for us as far as that mobile LN experience. It's not never great to be like, oh, I want to get a payment. Oh, he's not online. He's got to open his phone up and make sure he's online. But oh, wait, now he doesn't have his blocks in sync and he's got to wait another 5 minutes. Like, those are all not great things. If you could pass over your payment to an intermediary in a trust minimized fashion, and when they're ready and all synced it back up to the Lightning Network graph, then be able to accept that last HTLC and get your payment in, I think that would be a optimal solution.
Yeah, yeah, and there's been lots of ideas in the space. I know even years ago, Roy and the Breeze guys were talking about this idea of hodl invoices. But then there was a critique of that leap, meaning it's a long-lived HTLC and is locking up liquidity across the network. And so there was kind
Mm-hmm.
of argument about that. And I know Matt Corallo came out with a new idea as well about offline payments, but I haven't looked into the detail of it yet, so I wouldn't be able to
Yeah, Blue
speak to it.
Mat posted on the mailing list, I believe in October. He's got a great post about different methods of handling that handoff of a payment to a user when they're offline. And yeah, it's he seems to hit on PTLCs potentially giving us that functionality, and an LSP that's plugged into the user's like client mobile app, and just holding on to that payment until they're ready to phone in and have it passed off to them. So definitely not as trust minimized as perhaps being online all the time, but you know, a, a solution with acceptable trade offs, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And so the other thing Zeus is known for is being a bit of a cross implementation wallet, right? Because you support LND and Core Lightning, which used to be called C Lightning, just for some listeners who don't know. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences there? Has that been more difficult to try to support across different implementations?
Oh, certainly. I mean, so Zeus supports something like 5 different APIs. So we have LND, C Lightning, or Core Lightning through C Lightning REST or Spark APIs. They haven't had their own in-house API until just the very latest release, and we'll be looking at that. It's CLN's gRPC API. So um, yeah, speaking on that real quickly, we're really excited about that because that's going to just ship with all the new features that come with C Lightning. So we're not going to have to depend upstream for C Lightning REST or Spark to get new features implemented. So we could potentially be getting C Lightning features into Zeus much more quickly. Um, so we got support for LND, C Lightning, Eclair, and then LND Hub. So that's what Blue
Okay.
Wallet uses, but it's also been used by a lot of different um, apps like LNBits, so you can potentially host an instance for friends or family. Let's say you want them to have access to funds on Lightning. The funds are segregated, but you don't necessarily want them to worry about liquidity or channel management. That's a pretty good Uncle Jim solution. So, although that's custodial, I think that fits into the ethos of Zeus still.
Yeah,
So
gotcha.
yeah, as far as implementing all of them, it's been quite challenging because not only is the functionality across all the implementations different, with a lot of divergence coming up, some implementations having new features, ahead of others, and like Bolt 12, for example, in C Lightning or CLN. But also the API is having quite a bit of a divergence. The format in which each piece of data needs to be passed in to do every operation um, it's quite different. So what we've had to do is orchestrate and design Zeus in a way that we could abstract all the different calls out from each of the different APIs, and uh, detail how they should be called and with which bits of data, but also by putting different flags on those API implementation files and detailing what features are accessible to them, so that when Zeus is rendering the interface for a user, it'll know, okay, like you could hide this, you could hide the channels tab for the LND Hub users. They don't have access to that,
Gotcha.
for example. So we've got quite a good way of doing it. Um, that being said, it's been quite a lot of work to make sure everything works smoothly together. So, interoperability and supporting a lot of different implementations is definitely a lot of work for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, I can imagine that over time, as they update things, or maybe they deprecate some function in it, they deprecate some API call, and then you're like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, wait, what's the new thing? Okay, I need to, so I can imagine there's a lot with that. In
yeah. I
terms
mean,
of,
versioning too,
yeah,
for sure.
right, right.
It's like, oh, this guy's got an older version of LND. He shouldn't see this feature yet. Yeah, like that's another thing we've had to account for.
Right. Yeah, that's because if they don't update their L&D, you still have to support that in Zeus. So then you're like, oh,
Yeah, yeah. So like when new features were getting added at that rate, we're like, okay, we need to have a tag that says this feature is only supported after this release. And then we're like, oh, now they're deprecating stuff. Now we need like a tail end flag, only support this up until this feature. So we've gone through it all every which way, but now that things have gotten a little more solid with most of these releases, it's less hectic, but things still get changed and deprecated, and you got to stay on top of API changes for sure.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and in terms of features and things like that, can you tell us a little bit about your journey there? Because there are all these kind of crazy different features out there in the Lightning world, and there's no top-down leader here. You just kind of see something and
No.
it becomes popular, whether that is LNURL, whether that is even BIP21, like Miles Suter and the Cash App gang are big on BIP21. And
Oh, that's
and
the
even
unified
inside,
QRs.
yeah,
Yeah, we're definitely very interested by the prospect of unified QRs. And the only downside I can see to them is that you're cramming so much data into a singular QR. It can be difficult for older phones to, with not so great cameras, to be able to read that data. It either takes longer or it's not so clear. So I think we're going to support that moving forward with options for users to just create singular QRs like the old way. And
yeah.
that also gets mitigated a little bit by NFC, which we have in the app. So tap to pay, people are pretty familiar with that, like Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, tap your uh, credit card to pay in retailers. We've taken that for scanning anything you would scan with your camera, you can do with NFC and Zeus.
Yeah, and that's fantastic because then it might really smooth the interface and things. Now, maybe the argument would still be, hey, some of those old phones don't have NFC, or some like
Yeah.
people who are less tech savvy, maybe they don't have NFC enabled or whatever, or maybe for if they're security conscious, they've got it disabled for that reason. So, I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
too. But nevertheless, I think it provides another option and gives people choices in how they want to use Bitcoin, spend and receive Bitcoin. So that's really cool. Also, I guess there are things with all these kind of new functionality. So LNURL is an example, and then within LNURL, there's different bundle categories as well, isn't there? There's LNURL pay, receive, authenticate. So can you tell us a little bit about Zeus and LNURL?
Yeah, so LNURL is basically the spec on top of Lightning Network that uses HTTP requests to serve up the data required for different operations. So let's say uh, I want to get an invoice from you, Stephan, and you're offline because our time zones are different. I could just query your Lightning address or your LN URL pay address, and that will do a call to your Lightning node, fetch an invoice, and return it to me. And yeah, in Zeus, we support all the main features of LNURL. The thing is that the LNURL spec is like constantly upgrading, and there are new improvements that people are proposing through these, I believe, they're LUD improvement specs. And we're not on top of all of them, but we do support all the main functionality. So LNURL withdrawal, like scan a QR code to trigger withdrawal to your node. That's awesome. Um, LNURL channel to get a channel open to you. LNURL pay to make a payment and fetches the invoice for you. And LNURL auth, which is definitely an underrated one. So basically, you can scan a QR code to log into specific websites. Um, Definitely an understated feature there. Just, you have private keys on your Lightning node. Why shouldn't they be able to authenticate you? So very much looking forward to that feature being more widespread. I believe you could use it on places like Ellen Market right now, Ellen Markets.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as we're exiting this era of traditional passwords and people are becoming more conscious of the risk there, I think login schemes like this make perfect sense for us to move to, especially if we're keeping such well care of these keys because they control our finances. I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of things like managing your relationship with LSPs, as an example, is that something where there might be more development on that pathway of how to, like, as an example, when you've spun up your node to be able to buy a channel from somebody, because the kinds of users who are using Zeus tend to be running a more they tend to be running like a bigger node, and so they would need to be doing this kind of thing. Or another example might be swap swap providers, right? So on chain and off chain swapping out. So being able to spend some on your Lightning channel and then take it back on chain. Are these things you're looking at, or how are you seeing that with Zeus?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there's not going to be something that happens in the immediate future, but it's something that's on our radar. I would say moving forward, it's very likely that we'll have access to both Loop services as well as different LSPs. And I think we're actually quite early days with all that can be done with LSPs. I think it's very important that users have choice, and I think something we're doing really uniquely in the Lightning space, generally speaking, there are outliers, is that we're letting users have access to all these different competing services, and ultimately the users are really going to benefit from it. So traditionally in Silicon Valley VC culture, it's all about building these walled gardens to keep the users in and closed so that they don't go somewhere else to a competitor. They just keep coming back to you. And I think that when we're talking about an open monetary network like Bitcoin and Lightning, um, those same sort of mechanics are just not going to fly, especially with users that are savvy and technical and actually doing stuff like managing their own channels. Like they'll find a way to open that channel out via the command line if they really have to. So what I would really like to see is there to be some sort of convergence of LSP standards, and for there to be a lot of openness and um, you know compatibility across apps. So I should be able to pick between multiple different LSPs and even enter in a custom one, and be able to compare their rates and their services and what they have to offer me. So I'm really hoping that we see a future where you fire up your Breeze, your Zeus, whatever the next wallet's going to be, and users have the option to use whatever makes sense for them.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, there's all these different things you want to think about, right? It's how well connected is that LSP? What kind of upfront fee are they charging you? And then
Mm-hmm.
even on that channel, once they've sent it to you, if it's a channel, what is the routing fee they are charging? So
Yeah, that's
these are
that's
just
absolutely right.
yeah,
And beyond that, Stefan, I would say that people's needs on the Lightning Network are quite different. Some channels might make more sense for some users than others. Depending on what it what it costs to you and in your mind, like that cost of capital that you're putting up in that channel, and also what your economic relationships are with these parties. Like, are you going to be sending money in that direction because you're buying something for them, or they're connected to someone that you're routing stuff through? There's like not really one size fits all solution for um, users in terms of like a certain set of channels or certain LSP services. Um, if you can put one together, like a general speaking one like Breeze or Phoenix makes, like you could definitely save upon fees if you were to put the channels together yourself. So everyone is really different. So we need to provide all the options we can for them.
yeah, absolutely. And so, in terms of Zeus community, how has that grown over time? Have you had a lot of contributors, a lot of people who are helping out, whether that's in the chat or whether that's in development or whether it's in support or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a vibrant community now. A lot of our community is on Slack. So, not Slack. Well, Slack, we have a developer set up. So, we usually talk about all our PRs, and, our core of contributors are usually talking on there. But Telegram is usually where our, users are. As far as back to devs, we would say it got about um, I don't know, something like 20 plus contributors, and I'd say about 4 or 5 of them are pretty frequent contributors, or at least check in on us once in a while. So like Fiat Jaff, who's done a lot of stuff with LNURL, he's contributed some code for us, added implementation support for Eclair, I believe. We've got Paul Miller's written some code for us. Um, we've got this new great contributor, Dregs, who's working over at Bitcoin Company right now. He's very active and has been providing a lot of features, namely our pin pads and um, decoy pin stuff. So that's been really awesome. Um, but as far as managing the project, it's me and Bosch. So Bosch came on early last year, and I got reached out to by Pavelnex from he does a lot of
BTC
stuff
Pay.
with BTC Pay
Yeah.
server, and he told me that a new group was being spun up called Bitcoin Design Community, and they were looking for some partner projects to team up with. So he's like, in a really polite way, he's like, "Hey, Ev, Zeus is great, but it's ugly, and you need help. You wanna?" And you're like, I'm like, definitely. I definitely don't have an eye as a designer. When I was working on front end stuff, I had a designer named Hector who I'd always worked with, and he was making stuff look pixel perfect, before and after, and I was just putting the code together. So, yeah, that proved to be a really amazing collaboration, and I can't sing their praises enough. So, Bosch has become, he's the design lead on all the frames of the new Zeus redesign. Has also become a co-maintainer of the project, and he does sort of like a product manager role now. So that's been incredible. We've had Stephan Delorme. He did all our branding and provided a lot of feedback to us that's been invaluable. And there's countless other people there that provided great feedback too. Tiana helped make our website, design our website. We got guys like Christoph and Johns, who are veterans that have also given us incredible feedback, and Connor too. So that's definitely been a big part of the puzzle, and I'm forever grateful for those guys.
Fantastic. And so, what's the situation around making it sustainable? And is it seen like this is just an open source project? Is there a plan to sort of make it a revenue thing, or is it a donation? Where, or what's the thinking there?
So Zeus is always going to be 100% free and open source software, and we're going to make sure we never ruin that part of it. That being said, moving forward, I am personally intrigued by different LSP services and making the user experience for newcomers much better. So I think we're still sort of early in this race, but I really want to dive into it and experiment with what we could offer up to our users. So I'm not going to say exactly when that will be in place or kick off, but it's definitely part of the plan. In the meantime, Zeus is doing perfectly fine as far as just users just throwing us a couple sats here and there. It's funny, like sometimes I'll pop open my node, my BTC Pay to see the invoices I got in, and sometimes people are just sending me like 2 or 3 sats, which is so minuscule, but um, every set get sent to the project really means a lot to us, and we put to good use, whether it be just making sure our servers are top notch and running at top speed, or whether it be sending sats to a contributor to get a new feature in. And we've had quite a lot of success with putting out bounties. So we've got a bounties page on Zeus, and we actually got our first grant from Human Rights Foundation in, was it 2020? And they gave us a full Bitcoin, and we put up the majority of that toward various bounties. So we put up 5 bounties, and each and every single one of them hit. And we've got varying new features from Eclair support to built-in Tor process into the app, which is now a free and open source library that other projects can use. And we've seen other projects like Blue Wallet, and I believe Blixt may have also used it too. I think the Hexa guys are in the middle of integrating that as well. So it's really sweet to see something that you help fund get used by other open source projects and bring a lot of value to the space. So I got a lot of issues with Tor. It's definitely like 90% of the questions people ask in our user chats. But at the same time, it really is powerful technology, and it's like you said, it's just magical when you get to connect back to your node on the other side of the planet. It's indescribable, really.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I want to chat a bit about payment reliability as well as subjects like AMP and MPP. So, uh, what I'm seeing from some users is we get some people who are, and it's a really weird thing for me because I see some users who are very like, oh yeah, I get most payments through, no issues, and then I've got others who are saying, nah, even I'm really struggling to get payments through, even sometimes in a direct channel circumstance. I'm curious, and whether you are seeing this in your chats with other people who are just using Lightning Network generally. Is it that people who are trying to be a self-sovereign Lightning node router, are they doing it wrong, or like is it just that there's like difficulty of making larger payments from a making payments reliable point of view?
So there's definitely a lot of challenges with reliability in terms of Lightning, especially if you're just getting started. And I think the number one misconception is people trying to receive from a counterparty and they just have one channel and that channel is just like freshly opened. And people don't realize that they need to have that information about that channel propagate over the Lightning Network's gossip network for people to know where it is, what connections it has, and how to make a payment to it. So I'd say that's number one. Number two is people often not having enough channels or channels that are not well connected to the middle of the network. They maybe just connect to a friend and think they're okay, but they're just a couple of Raspis with not so great liquidity. But there's also just a lot of general challenges in the network as we're growing. We're growing at a clip, like very quickly. And there are definitely some challenges as far as fee calculation. So in many cases, we have operators that are advertising at one rate, they make an adjustment, and payments will begin to fail because the new rates haven't propagated through the gossip network. But also, there's some quirks between the implementations and some scenarios where people are using zero fee routing. And shouts out to zero fee routing. He's a Zeus supporter, but I've heard that also causing problems too. So there's a lot of points where there's definitely couldn't be a lot of improvements as far as reliability. And I think actually number one, beyond user education and knowing how the mechanics of the gossip network work and the liquidity work, I think our algorithms for pathfinding are really sort of novice right now, and I think a lot of enhancements are going to be built upon them. A lot of that's probably going to be due to Renee's work, if you've been following that. So I'm really looking forward to the implementations, really diving in and evaluating this. Because it's only going to become more challenging, I think, over time in some regards. Certainly as the network grows, there's going to be a lot of growing pains and a lot of room for denial of service attacks. So let's try to get the routing optimizations out of the way first so that we can focus on other things as we're scaling up.
Yeah. And so do you see it like that currently portends or is pushing towards a more hub and spoke model, or where it's becoming harder for that sovereign user per se, like who's not a big company, just like an everyday individual who wants to run his Lightning node, that it's becoming more difficult? Or do you believe that will always remain feasible?
That's a great question, actually. I think naturally the network is always going to have really big hubs on it, right? There's always going to be the service providers, the big businesses, and they're going to just have crazy connection. Like for an example, like an exchange is going to have crazy liquidity if it's well frequented. That being said, I think as long as we can find ways for it to be as, you know, like not super overbearing to be an operator, as possible, I think then that's what's really going to be most important. I think stuff like denial of service, like we were talking just a moment ago, I think that's going to be a big challenge. Certainly, stuff like being on Tor and having some degree of firewall is going to be helpful. But we also got to think about how we construct the network moving forward, and stuff like onion messages could potentially add a really big burden on these operators and make it much more difficult. If you're dealing with more traffic, that's more writes and reads from your node. It's going to be using more space and logs. It's just going to be more difficult to reach you if a lot of people are trying to hit you too. So, these are things we got to be mindful of, figuring out that balance of functionality that we want on the layer and, what the cost is. And that's not something unique to Lightning. We're talking about stuff like CTV today and discussing the pros and cons of that, and the benefits it adds versus operational costs it could add to people's setups.
Yeah, yeah, totally fair. And even on the zero fee routing thing, right? So I think people saw that on Twitter recently, where I think zero fee routing was making a comment about his channel DB getting really large, and then I think after that, I believe the Lightning Labs guys came out and said, "Oh yeah, okay, actually we were logging a lot because that we were trying to use that for error and like troubleshooting and tech support." And so I think in the new release, I think they're doing slightly less logging, so
Yeah,
that
and
way that
pathfinding too, having past data to figure out the best routes moving forward. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just finding where the sweet points are in a lot of this engineering at this point, figuring out what the optimal rate at which to do stuff at, and where to put the certain burden of things at. It's definitely part of the growing pains of the network right now.
yeah. And also one other area. Speaking of Rene Picard, do you have any thoughts on the whole zero base fee movement?
It's definitely intriguing, but I think there's definitely some impressive numbers that are being put out by guys like that are just moving lots and lots of volume. But for me, I think that I value my capital a little bit more, and I think there should be some sort of base fee for that. But I'm not gonna judge others how they value their capital. So I'm very appreciative of all the experiments that are going on as far as fee setting and trying to do pathfinding and trying to figure out optimizations there. Uh, I can't stress enough like the experimentation we're seeing from all these different parties across the network is uh, great to see. It's really imperative for growth trying to experiment on finding out what works and what doesn't. But personally, I haven't been sold on the zero fee stuff. Uh,
Gotcha. Yeah, as in zero base fee. Yeah, yeah,
zero base fee, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a few things around. Like, I guess I hear lots of different things in the ecosystem, right? Because I'm personally more in the Lightning bullish case, but I hear this sort of Lightning bear case as well. And then obviously you're creating a Lightning wallet, so you basically by definition you have to be bullish on the Lightning network, right? But I think the bears on the Lightning network might be saying, "Oh, look, see, it's too hard for the sovereign individual. It's it's not private, or and it's sort of like, oh, you can't get the payments through, or it's not reliable for larger amounts." And yeah, I think for me, maybe this is the lightning bull in me is saying, hey, look, it's only 4 years of mainnet. Like, think about where Bitcoin was in 2013 for the person who wanted to validate their own coins and use their own hardware wallets and everything. Like, well, hardware wallets weren't a thing then, but the point
Exactly.
being, it took a lot of technical capability to be able to use your own node with your own hardware wallet in, let's say, 2017. And I think it was only until, arguably, okay, yeah, there was Armory, so you could do the kind of Armory offline thing, which I did do when I was a noob myself. But I think thinking back to Bitcoin, it's probably 2019 or so when, say, Nodl and MyNode came out to sort of innovate that game of running your own Bitcoin core node with your own Electrum server and thus making it easy to run your own hardware wallet with that. And so, it was 2019 to do that. And so I don't know, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that in terms of where Lightning is at relative to how long it's been out and relative to how easy it is for people to do their
So,
own
so
things?
we're in a weird spot right now because we're seeing so many things happen very quickly as far as adoption goes. All these platforms either stating intentions for future support of Lightning Network, or a lot of exchanges and on ramps supporting it in this past year. That being said, I think everything is super super nascent as far as the protocol itself. We don't even have Bolt 12 fully out there. We don't have blinded routes and like decent privacy as standard for receivers yet. But I think really the things that are most nascent are the LSP stuff. We're really just scratching the surface. And you'll see right now that the biggest attractors of Lightning within our community are the people that are having to run the LSPs right now and have really taken a gamble trying to start up our early iterations of these services, really feeling the pain of capital allocation. We've got people who create awesome WAS in this space who've told me privately that they don't want to get into the LSP game because it's a very difficult problem of capital allocation. Anyone will tell you anyone who's even just running a singular service on the web for an exchange or a store, like you can't predict the future flows really of where money is going to be coming and going from 100%. So now add in thousands of users you're trying to offer your services to, and you're opening up channels to them on the hopes that you'll make a return on them, routing a lot of transactions to them or them becoming a long-term customer. But they could just as easily delete your app and just have that channel open. It's like, when do you decide to close it? These channels, at how much are you going to open to them on initially? When do you re-up it, and for how much more? There's a lot of tricky challenges in the mix. This all being said, I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting improvements to the network that happen in the next couple of years that are going to make operating these LSPs much easier and give these operators much more flexibility. But I also think that there's tons of experimentation that LSP operators have not even scratched the surface of that I'm excited to see people get into. And I think on that front, users have so much to benefit from.
Yeah, for sure. And that could benefit all kinds of users, whether they are using the more hybrid model sort of wallet or using their own full node and using LSP services to help manage the channels in and out, or swapping in and out, and all of these things. From
Yeah, I
a
mean,
yeah, go.
for the default users, right? Like, it's very difficult, Stephan, to imagine a world in which like my mom is going to be managing her own channels, right? Like she's just not
Yeah,
really pragmatic, right? Today, best solution for her is probably using, an LND hub I have set up for her, or doing trade off and having a little less privacy and using one of these other apps. But um, yeah, I mean, we all sort of came out the gate thinking that autopilot would be a little bit more of an established thing, and that hasn't gotten too much innovation. But I'm really excited to see what's going to happen moving forward, and what roles LSPs can play further in onboarding these users, but also affording them flexibility. Like, for example, like, I'm not too keen on wallets that have this LSP built into them, but don't give you any ability to take things into your own hands and open channels up on your own, right? Like,
gotcha.
you got your node, it's all running on your phone, and you got a pretty good user experience, but what's the next step after that? Like, you're sort of just locked into their platform. You can't eject your node. You can't open up your own channels. You can't get into fee setting. It feels like some players are sort of just trying to recreate these walled gardens that I was talking about earlier.
I see. Yeah. And in terms of privacy on the Lightning Network, I think this is another area where there are endless debates about the privacy on the Lightning Network. And of course, there are people working on ideas to improve that, people like Bastian from Async, and others out there who are talking about this or have done talks and have spoken about perhaps a pathway to making Lightning more private with things like route blinding, trampoline routing, and other ideas. I'm curious where you see things are so far. Do you see Lightning as an improvement, privacy improvement to just standard on-chain Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think we have this one improvement right out the gate in that the transactions don't get recorded onto the blockchain ledger directly. Yes, of course, you have to interact with the blockchain when you're opening or closing a channels, But just the very fact that the transactions themselves are ephemeral is a huge privacy improvement. That being said, you can't really say that using Lightning Network right now is private. There's a whole lot of caveats, um, starting from having to open up those channels on chain and the analysis there. Perhaps Taproot channels will help out a little bit with that, as all Taproot transactions won't really be able to distinguish what they're for, whether they're a channel open or not. Then you have the problem of the gossip network, where you're saying, "Oh, I got this open channel now, and here's the UTXO to back it." Um, that's a huge problem. This all being said, you've got some pretty good privacy as a sender on Lightning. The onion routing makes it so that a receiver doesn't know exactly where it came from, just the last hop before it got to them. But receiver privacy is not good. So when you create an invoice, it has your public key, which is tied to all your public gossip activity embedded in the invoice. So the real solution there is likely going to be uh, blinded routes becoming standard in Bolt 12. And it's just going to be a little bit more calculation for the last person in your public hop to figure out where exactly the transaction is going. Um, so, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of caveats. And really, if you want to be using Lightning, even as a sender privately today, it really has to be done in conjunction with some other on-chain privacy tools. Something
Right, like
like,
a coin join to fund the Lightning node before and using Tor before you then make those payments.
yeah, absolutely. And that's actually been a bit of a focus of mine with Zeus. We are trying to make it so that at least L&D users are able to import XPubs and craft transactions for both their on-chain transactions and channel opens from external accounts like XPubs. So we're hoping to get that functionality into version 0.7, which is our next major release. We're about like 60% through the integration there, but we're trying to make sure it plays nicely with all of the air gap, camera, and NFC hardware wallets. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but
So typically, you're having like an XPub function where you can kind of use coins from another wallet inside Zeus. Like, how would you get the signature over, or how does that part work?
So the great thing is with a lot of these new hardware wallets is that they have ways of communicating over their air gap. So traditionally, we've seen a lot of devices like Seed Signer, the Foundation Passport, um, Kobo Vault. They use QR codes and cameras, and you can pass over the unsigned PSBT or partially signed Bitcoin transaction file over animated QR codes. But now we also got stuff like the Cold Card Mark IV, which I thought I had on my desk.
NFC.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's got NFC now, and Zeus supports NFC. We just got to make sure that data is uniform and we can talk back and forth pretty easily.
Clever. So then, as an example, you could sort of open channels from your hardware wallet ish, and then when they close back down, are they going to close back down back to that same, or is it going to close back down into, say, your on-chain Bitcoin wallet inside Zeus, as an example?
So you could actually choose where you want it to go at 2 points. You could say, okay, on channel open, I'm specifying my closeout address, or when you're actually closing it out, you can change it again. So you're going to have a lot of functionality, and within Zeus, you're going to be able to even pop through your different hardware wallets and generate a fresh address just for certain operations like that. So yeah, it's super exciting to just have some assurances about interacting with what potentially could be people's saving stacks on a hardware device and be able to use that in a fairly safe manner to interact with the Lightning Network. So super excited about that. Um, but I'm more so excited about the possibility of having perhaps some of these coin join software providers to do a little work to help things work seamlessly in conjunction with us. So, for example, Samurai Wallet's been working for a couple of years, it feels like, on PSBT signing that get crafted from an external app. And I would really love for them to get that over the finish line. That way you could turn your Whirlpool mixes into channel opens right within Zeus and not have to spend an extra
Like
transactions worth of
transaction moving it
fees
out.
to
Yeah.
move it over to Zeus's hot wallet. So I think there'd be a whole lot of benefits there. And yeah, would love to provide that same functionality for, all the different uh, coin join providers. I'm sure we'll do it with Join Market if possible, and Wasabi too.
Yeah, gotcha. And you can imagine how that could be done either with a QR code or with NFC, or maybe even if it's on the same device, right? Like if you had literally Samurai Wallet on the same phone with your Zeus, I don't know. Um,
Yeah, definitely. Especially since we have sort of things like application linking, where we could say, just spit it out to Zeus, and it could just be a seamless thing between the two applications. Very much love to see that. That's not really in my hands, but if anyone from Samurai Wallet would like to talk to me about it, I'm all ears.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's pretty cool to see. And we might end up seeing a bit of that idea of a combo of CoinJoin and Lightning. And maybe that's one way to take it forward. Also, I know Lisa has done with Core Lightning this whole idea of collaborative channel opens. And so you could sort of say, let's say you and I do a collaborative channel open and we both put some funds in. That kind of looks like a pay join, right?
Yeah, yeah. You don't really know who's putting up which funds exactly, and you get a whole lot of privacy in terms of the on-chain analysis there. So that's super exciting, and those dual funded channel opens, those liquidity ads, as you're calling it, where these offers are being broadcast over Lightning's gossip network itself. Super exciting, and would be something that I would really very much like to get into Zeus. I think it's really just contingent on um, that CLN RPC API. So hopefully, once we get that in, well, it's also going to take some UI UX work from our guy Bosch, but yeah, definitely something I'm super excited about. And I think something that could really thrive. It just needs better interfaces. I think there's only one GUI for it in terms of the Ellen Router app. I don't think anyone else really has one for liquidity ads. So it would be great to make Zeus the second. That being said, we got a lot on our plate, so don't
Yeah, of
want to get
course.
anyone's
Of
hopes
course.
up that it's coming too soon.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's like there's just so much work and so many things that have to be done. But it seems to me like if you're really paying attention, you're seeing all this advancement and all this improvement over time, right? Because if you compare back to a few years ago, it was way harder to do these things, or it was way less reliable to do these things. Now we're seeing pretty steady improvement, at least. At least that's how it looks like to me. So yeah. So yeah, I guess any finishing thoughts or things you want to leave listeners with in terms of stuff they should be thinking about on Zeus or the Lightning Network just generally?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot. It may seem intimidating, especially if you just use like a install and go Lightning wallet. Uh, but there's tons of great resources online, including our community, including countless guides. Uh, if you need help getting set up with your own Lightning node and connecting to Zeus, you can even hit me up directly. My DMs are open on Twitter, and I'm on Telegram in our group chatting all the time. Um, Ultimately, I want to try to prevent a world in which we're trusting custodians or third parties with our data to be using this great monetary network. And I just want Zeus to be an option for people to do things themselves. We'll write the code for you to run on your device, and from there, I don't want to know anything about your transaction data or your node at all. So, um, yeah, it's easy, and you could do it with just a couple clicks. So, I encourage everyone out there who hasn't done already, just run your own node.
Excellent. And yeah, so listeners, as I said, I'm a Zeus user myself. I encourage you check it out. And Evan, where can people find you, and where can they find Zeus online?
Yeah, sure thing. So on Twitter, my account's Evan Kaloudis, EvanKaloudis. Zeus is on there at Zeus LN, LN for Lightning Network, so Zeus LN. And our main website is at zeusln.app. Our code's all free and open source, and if you're a coder, reach out. We help you get set up, and the more contributors, the merrier.
Excellent. Thanks.
Cheers, Stephan.